October 15, 1943. Lockhart, Texas. The pre-dawn air hangs thick with mesquite smoke as Werner Schmitt steps out of the military transport truck, his hands still bearing the calluses of operating an MG-42 machine gun just 8 months earlier in Tunisia. The Afrika Korps corporal inhales deeply, and for a moment, his mind travels 5,000 miles back to his father's smokehouse in Bavaria. But the white PW stenciled on the back of his denim work uniform brings him back to reality. He is prisoner of war Thamgra 31G 45892, and today he begins work at Kreutz Market, where the local butcher, Edgar Smitty Schmidt, desperately needs skilled hands to keep Central Texas fed. What Werner doesn't know is that he and 400 other German prisoners with butchering backgrounds are about to revolutionize American barbecue forever. This is the hidden story of how Nazi Germany's defeated soldiers became the unlikely architects of modern Texas BBQ, introducing precision temperature control, specialized wood selection techniques, and the art of the perfect smoke ring that would transform roadside meat stands into culinary institutions worth millions. By war's end, these men wouldn't just be prisoners, they'd be neighbors, business partners, and in some cases, sons-in-law to the very Texans, who had once viewed them as dangerous enemies. Their smokehouses would feed presidents, their techniques would be studied by pitmasters worldwide, and their legacy would simmer in every brisket from Austin to Amarillo. The arrival of the enemy. The story begins on January 8, 1943, when the first trainload of German POWs arrived at Camp Hearne, Texas, part of what would become the largest POW operation in American history. By June 1944, Texas housed 78,982 enemy prisoners across 70 camps, more than any other state. The War Department had a problem, with 16 million American men in uniform who would harvest the cotton, tend the cattle, and process the meat that would feed both the home front and the troops overseas. Colonel Daniel F. Gilman, commander of the 8th Service Command, had proposed a radical solution in a classified memo dated December 2, 1942. The German prisoners possess skills critical to our agricultural infrastructure. Among the Afrika Korps captives, we have identified 1,247 professional butchers, 892 meat processors, and 445 men with commercial smoking and curing experience. These skills should not be wasted behind barbed wire. The Texas cattle industry was in crisis. In 1942, beef production had increased by 32% to meet wartime demand, but the workforce had decreased by 61%. Small-town meat markets and smokehouses faced closure. It was in this desperate environment that men like Werner Schmitt found themselves trading their Wehrmacht uniforms for butcher's aprons. Master Sergeant Jim Sullivan, who supervised the POW work program at Camp Swift near Austin, would later testify to Congress. These weren't just soldiers, they were craftsmen. The German army had mobilized entire guilds. We had master butchers from Munich, sausage makers from Frankfurt, and smoking specialists from the Black Forest. Their knowledge was centuries old. The master butchers of the Wehrmacht. Among the most influential was Heinrich Henry Kellner, a 34-year-old master butcher from Nuremberg who had operated 3 shops before being drafted into the 21st Panzer Division. Captured at Kasserine Pass in February 1943, Kellner arrived at Camp McLean, Texas, on April 3, 1943. Within a week, he was assigned to Gonzales Food Market, where owner John Mueller was struggling to keep up with demand from nearby Kelly Air Force Base. Kellner's first day shocked Mueller, as he would write in his diary, preserved in the Gonzales County Historical Museum, April 10, 1943. The German worked for 14 hours straight, breaking down 6 steers with a precision I'd never seen. He used every part, nothing wasted. He showed my boys how to cut against the grain at exactly 38-degree angles. He measured with his fingers like a pianist. When I offered him a cigarette break, he asked instead to inspect our smokehouse. He shook his head like a disappointed schoolmaster. What Kellner saw in Texas smokehouses appalled his Prussian sense of precision. Temperatures varied wildly. Wood selection was haphazard. Meat placement followed no scientific principle. Through broken English and elaborate hand gestures, he began teaching the Texan workers what he knew. Temperature must be constant, 225 degrees Fahrenheit. No more, no less, he would say, converting from the Celsius he knew. In Germany, we say Räuchern ist Wissenschaft, smoking is science. Another significant figure was Otto Brandt, formerly of the 15th Panzer Grenadier Division, who arrived at Camp Concordia on May 15, 1943. Brandt had owned the largest commercial smokehouse in Stuttgart before the war, employing 47 workers and producing 10,000 pounds of smoked meat weekly. Assigned to tailor meat processing, he immediately identified critical flaws in their operation. Robert Taylor Jr., whose grandfather founded the company, recalled in a 1987 interview, "Otto drew diagrams on butcher paper showing how smoke should flow. He calculated air circulation ratios. He taught us about the Maillard reaction before we even knew it had a name. The man treated brisket like a mathematical equation, the science of smoke." The German prisoners brought with them centuries of guild knowledge that had been passed down through generations. In medieval Germany, the Metzger butcher guilds had developed precise techniques that were closely guarded secrets. These methods, refined over 500 years, were suddenly being demonstrated in small Texas towns. Friedrich Fred Zimmermann, captured with the 10th Panzer Division in Tunisia, became legendary at Camp Fannin for his oak selection process. Previously the chief smoker at Munich's famous Donisel restaurant, Zimmermann could identify different oak species by smell alone. He taught Texas workers that post oak, abundant in central Texas, produced a smoke nearly identical to the Stieleiche, pedunculate oak, used in Bavaria. In a letter to his wife dated August 8, 1943, translated from German, held in the National Archives, "Liebste Anna, you would not believe it. They have the perfect wood here but don't know how to use it. I showed them how to age it for exactly 6 months, how to split it with the grain, how to maintain the coal bed at precisely 5 centimeters depth. The Americans are eager students. The owner's son, barely 16, follows me like I am a professor. Perhaps there is purpose in this captivity after all. The Germans introduced the concept of the smoke ring, the pink layer, beneath the surface of properly smoked meat that results from nitrogen dioxide in wood smoke combining with myoglobin in the meat. Texas pitmasters had occasionally achieved this by accident. The Germans made it a consistent science. Kurt Hoffman, a POW at Camp Bowie, who worked at Abilene Meat Company, documented his smoking process in a notebook that survived the war. His entry from September 12, 1943 details: begin smoke at 180 degrees for first hour to allow meat pores to open. Increase to 225 degree. Maintain humidity at 65% using water pan. Apple cider vinegar in the water creates acid that helps bark formation. Rotate meat every 2 hours for even exposure. Total time for brisket, 1.5 hours per pound. These techniques, revolutionary for 1940s Texas, became the foundation of modern barbecue methodology. Enemies to neighbors. The transformation from enemy prisoners to accepted community members didn't happen overnight. Initially, many Texans were hostile to the idea of Germans working in their communities. The Fredericksburg Standard reported on June 5, 1943. Citizens protest enemy prisoners working in local businesses. "My son is fighting these Krauts in Italy," says Mrs. Dorothy Anderson, "and now they're working next door." But pragmatism and daily interaction slowly changed attitudes. The prisoners were polite, worked hard, and many spoke English. More surprisingly, many had relatives in Texas. German immigration to Texas dated back to the 1830s, and towns like New Braunfels and Fredericksburg were founded by German settlers. Walter Koenig, a POW at Camp Mexia, discovered his second cousin owned a farm just 30 miles from the camp. Hans Mueller, imprisoned at Camp Huntsville, learned his great-uncle had emigrated to Texas in 1882 and established Mueller's Meat Market in LaGrange, still operating, and now needing workers. The most dramatic transformation occurred at Louis Mueller Barbecue in Taylor, Texas. Bobby Mueller, who was 19 in 1943, worked alongside POW Ernst Becker, a master butcher from Hamburg. Their relationship began with mutual suspicion, but evolved into genuine friendship. Bobby Mueller would later tell Texas Monthly, "Ernst taught me to read the meat, to see the marbling, to feel when it was ready." He'd say, "Bobby, listen to the sizzle. It tells you everything." We couldn't talk politics, that was forbidden, but we could talk meat for hours. On December 24, 1943, the Mueller family made a controversial decision. They invited Ernst and 2 other POWs to Christmas dinner. Bobby's father, Louis Mueller Sr., had to get special permission from Camp Commander Major William Bartholomew. The Major's response, preserved in military records: "The fraternization regulations are clear, but it's Christmas, and these men are 6,000 miles from home." Permission granted, but an MP must be present. That dinner became legendary in Taylor. Ernst Becker prepared a traditional German Christmas roast using Texas beef, combining Old World techniques with New World ingredients. The other guests, initially uncomfortable, were won over by the food and the prisoner's obvious homesickness. Margaret Mueller, Bobby's sister, wrote in her diary, now in the Taylor Public Library collection: December 24, 1943, the Germans sang Silent Night in their language. Mother cried. We all did. They're just boys, really. Ernst showed us pictures of his family in Hamburg. His daughter is my age. The war seemed very far away tonight. The techniques that transformed Texas. The German influence on Texas barbecue went beyond simple smoking. They introduced systematic approaches to every aspect of meat preparation. At Kreutz Market in Lockhart, Werner Schmitt revolutionized their sausage-making operation. Using techniques from his family's shop in Regensburg, he introduced the concept of precise fat-to-meat ratios: 70% lean, 30% fat, specific grinding sizes, 3 to 8 inch for texture, and natural casings properly cleaned with salt and vinegar. Don O'Neill, who worked at Kreutz Market as a teenager, remembered Werner would test the sausage mixture by frying a small patty. He'd taste it, think, then add a pinch of salt or white pepper. He treated it like a chemistry experiment. Before Werner, we just mixed it till it looked right. The Germans also introduced the concept of dry aging beef before smoking. Hans Richter, a POW at Camp Wallace working at Southside Market in Elgin, insisted on hanging beef for 21 days at 34-38 degrees with 85% humidity. This process, standard in German butcher shops but virtually unknown in 1940s Texas, concentrated flavors and tenderized tough cuts. The most lasting contribution was the standardization of the Texas Trinity: brisket, ribs, and sausage. Before the German influence, Texas barbecue was haphazard, varying wildly between establishments. The Germans, with their guild tradition of standardization, created consistent methods that could be taught and replicated. Wilhelm Bill Steinbach, a POW at Camp Hereford, created what many consider the definitive brisket technique while working at Cattleman's Steakhouse in Fort Worth. His method, documented in a 1944 letter to camp authorities requesting special wood supplies. First day, trim fat to 1 4-inch thickness. Apply salt and coarse black pepper only, 50-50 mixture. Let rest overnight at 38 degrees Celsius. Second day, begin smoke at 4 a.m. Fat side up first 6 hours, then flip. Maintain 225 degrees exactly. When internal temperature reaches 165 degrees, wrap in butcher paper, never foil, it steams, doesn't breathe. Continue until 203 degrees internal temperature. Rest 2 hours minimum before slicing. This technique, with minor variations, remains the standard in championship barbecue today. Romance across enemy lines. Perhaps the most unexpected development was the romantic relationships that bloomed between German POWs and Texas women. Despite strict non-fraternization rules, love found a way. The most famous case was that of Sergeant Klaus Weber and Dorothy Schultz, daughter of a German-American rancher in Gonzales County. Klaus, a tank commander captured in North Africa, worked on the Schultz ranch through the POW labor program. Dorothy, 22 and fluent in German from her grandmother, served as translator. Their romance, conducted through stolen glances and notes hidden in library books, scandalized the community. Dorothy's diary, discovered in 2003, reveals the depth of their connection. July 15, 1944. Klaus and I speak of the future, though we don't know if we have one. He wants to stay in Texas, to raise cattle and smoke meat like his grandfather did in Saxony. He draws pictures of the smokehouse he'll build someday. I know it's impossible, but I let myself dream. When Germany surrendered on May 8, 1945, Klaus faced mandatory repatriation. But Dorothy's father, Hermann Schultz, a WWI veteran himself, petitioned Senator Tom Connolly for help. His letter, preserved in Senate records, stated, "This young man has proven himself through hard work and character. He wishes to become an American, to contribute to our community. I ask not for an enemy soldier, but for the man who saved my ranch and loves my daughter." The case attracted national attention. The San Antonio Express ran the headline, "Nazi tank commander seeks to trade Panzer for ranch life." But public opinion was shifting. As the full horror of the Holocaust emerged, Americans began distinguishing between Nazi ideology and individual German soldiers, many of whom had been conscripted against their will. Klaus was allowed to remain, one of only 5,000 German POWs permitted to stay in America immediately after the war. He and Dorothy married on December 15, 1946, at St. Paul Lutheran Church in Gonzales. Their wedding reception featured both Texas brisket and German sauerbraten, symbolically uniting two cultures through food. The post-war integration. When the war ended, most German POWs were repatriated by June 1946. However, the Truman administration, recognizing the labor shortage and the prisoners' contributions, created the Delayed Repatriation Program. POWs with critical skills could remain until December 1946, and those with American sponsors could apply for immigration. Of the approximately 5,000 German POWs who worked in Texas meat processing and smoking operations, records indicate that 347 eventually returned as legal immigrants. Many were sponsored by the very businesses where they had worked as prisoners. Otto Brandt returned to Taylor Meat Processing in 1948, eventually becoming head smoker and training a generation of Texas pitmasters. His son, Michael Brandt, born in 1950, would win the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo World's Championship barbecue contest 3 times. Using his father's techniques, Werner Schmitt saved enough money to open his own smokehouse in Lockhart in 1951. Schmidt's smokehouse became famous for its perfect smoke, rings and consistent quality. In a 1975 interview with the Austin American Statesman, Werner reflected, "I came here in chains, but Texas gave me freedom and opportunity. Every brisket I smoke is a thank you to this country." Heinrich Kellner's story was particularly remarkable. After returning to Germany in 1946, he found Nuremberg destroyed and his family scattered. He immediately applied to return to Texas, sponsored by John Mueller. He arrived back in Gonzales on March 3, 1948, with his wife and surviving son. Kellner revolutionized Mueller's operation, introducing refrigerated dry aging rooms and precise temperature controls. By 1955, Gonzales Food Market was processing 50 cattle weekly and shipping smoked meat across Texas. Kellner became a naturalized citizen in 1953, taking the name Henry Kellner. His citizenship ceremony was attended by dozens of Gonzales residents, including several who had initially protested his presence a decade earlier. The integration wasn't always smooth. Some veterans groups protested hiring former enemy soldiers. In 1949, the American Legion post in New Braunfels passed a resolution condemning businesses that employed former POWs. But economic reality and personal relationships generally prevailed over political opposition. The Scientific Revolution. The German influence brought scientific rigor to what had been largely an intuitive art. They introduced meat thermometers to Texas barbecue, horrifying old-timers who judged doneness by look and feel. They created standardized recipes, measured in grams and degrees rather than pinches, and, until it looks right, Ernst Hoffman, who returned to Texas in 1947 to work at City Market in Luling, brought with him German-manufactured smoking equipment. His Heidelberg smoker, with precise dampers and temperature gauges, became the prototype for modern commercial smokers. He partnered with a local welder, Jim Richardson, to create the first mass-produced precision smoker in 1952. The Richardson-Hoffman smoker, capable of maintaining temperature within 2 degrees for 24 hours, revolutionized commercial barbecue. Within 5 years, their smokers were in use from Texas to Tennessee. The design, essentially unchanged, remains the industry standard. The Germans also introduced the concept of wood seasoning and storage. Karl Drescher, working at Black's Barbecue in Lockhart, built the first climate-controlled wood storage facility in Texas in 1949. He aged oak for exactly 6 months at 20% humidity, creating consistent smoke flavor year-round. Cultural fusion on the plate. The merger of German and Texas traditions created unique dishes that exist nowhere else. German-style sausages made with Texas beef and jalapenos. Brisket prepared with German spice rubs. Sauerkraut served alongside coleslaw at barbecue joints. At Pru's Meat Market in La Grange, POW-turned-citizen Fritz Preuss created the hot gut, a spicy sausage that combined German bratwurst techniques with Texas heat. The recipe, still secret, uses beef, pork, cayenne, and what Fritz would only describe as special German spices from the old country. The cultural exchange went both ways. German prisoners took Texas techniques back to Germany. When Kurt Hoffmann returned to Frankfurt in 1946, he opened Texas Joe's Smokehouse, introducing American-style barbecue to post-war Germany. Using techniques learned at Abilene Meat Company, but applying them to German meats, he created a sensation. American GIs stationed in Frankfurt became regular customers, amazed to find authentic Texas barbecue 5,000 miles from home. Some prisoners, even after returning to Germany, maintained connections with their Texas employers. Walter Koenig, repatriated in 1946, corresponded with the Mueller family for 40 years. His letters, preserved in the Taylor Historical Society, chronicle post-war Germany's recovery and his attempts to recreate Texas barbecue using German ingredients. In 1973, Walter returned to Texas for a reunion of Camp Mexia prisoners and guards. The Dallas Morning News covered the event, quoting Walter, "For 30 years I have dreamed of Texas brisket. In Germany I try to make it, but it's never quite right. The wood is different, the beef is different. But the friendship, that translates perfectly." The $1 Million Legacy. Today, the German influence on Texas barbecue represents billions in economic impact. Franklin Barbecue in Austin, where people wait in line for 5 hours, uses temperature-control techniques pioneered by German POWs. Aaron Franklin himself has acknowledged, studying old German smoking manuals translated from documents found in the camps, the precision that Germans brought transformed barbecue from a backyard activity to a legitimate culinary art. The James Beard Foundation, which now regularly honors pitmasters, traces the professionalization of barbecue partly to the German influence of the 1940s. Dr. Howard Miller, professor of culinary history at the University of Texas, stated in his 2019 book, Smoke and Tradition, the German POWs brought medieval guild knowledge to American folk cooking. They transformed barbecue from an occasional celebration to a daily craft. Without their influence, Texas barbecue might have remained a local curiosity rather than becoming a globally recognized cuisine. The economic impact extends beyond restaurants. The techniques introduced by German POWs laid the groundwork for Texas's commercial meat processing industry. Companies like Meyer's Elgin Smokehouse, founded by former POW Hans Meyer in 1949, now ship millions of pounds of smoked meat annually. Meyer's employs 400 people and generates $50 million in annual revenue. The Forgotten Memorial, in Lockhart, the barbecue capital of Texas, there's an unmarked stone behind Kreutz Market. Locals know it as the POW stone, placed there in 1950 by Werner Schmitt and other former prisoners who had returned to Texas. The simple inscription, in German and English, reads, Durch Rauch zur Freundschaft, through smoke to friendship. Every year on October 15th, the anniversary of Werner's first day at Kreutz Market, a small group gathers at the stone. They're descendants of POWs, children of camp guards and barbecue enthusiasts who know the hidden history. They share brisket and sausage, telling stories passed down through generations. Bobby Mueller, now 99, still attends when health permits. In 2022, he told the gathering, "These men came here as enemies and left as friends. They didn't just change our barbecue, they changed our hearts. Every time I smell smoking meat, I think of Ernst teaching me to listen to the sizzle. That's the sound of history cooking." The ongoing discovery, research into the German POW influence on Texas barbecue, continues to uncover new stories. In 2021, a trunk discovered in an abandoned building at the former Camp Swift contained hundreds of recipes written by POWs, detailed smoking diagrams, and letters describing their work in Texas smokehouses. Among the documents was a collaborative cookbook created by prisoners at 5 different camps, intended as a gift for their American supervisors. The book, titled Fleisch und Freundschaft, Meat and Friendship, contains 200 recipes combining German and Texas traditions. It's now being translated and will be published by the University of Texas Press. The Texas Historical Commission has begun marking sites where German POWs significantly influenced local barbecue traditions. Plaques now stand at 17 locations, with more planned. Each tells a brief story of the prisoners who worked there and their contributions to Texas culinary culture. The story of German POWs and Texas barbecue challenges our understanding of how culture spreads and evolves. It reminds us that even in war's darkest moments, humanity finds ways to connect through fundamental experiences. In this case, the universal appreciation for well-prepared food. These men, who arrived as defeated enemies, left an indelible mark on American culture. Their precision, craftsmanship, and dedication transformed a regional cooking style into an internationally recognized cuisine. Today's pitmaster competitions, with their precise temperature controls and scientific approach to smoking, owe a direct debt to the medieval guild knowledge that arrived in Texas, courtesy of the Wehrmacht. More profoundly, their story demonstrates the redemptive power of shared work and mutual respect. In the smoke-filled rooms of Texas barbecue joints, former enemies became colleagues, then friends, and eventually family. The techniques they taught became part of Texas tradition, so thoroughly integrated that few remember their origins. As we bite into perfectly smoked brisket with its distinctive smoke ring, we taste history. A history of conflict transformed into cooperation, of enemies becoming neighbors, of old-world knowledge enriching new-world traditions. The German POWs who thought they were seeing military training at that Texas rodeo in 1943 could never have imagined they were about to begin training of a different sort, one that would revolutionize American cuisine and create bonds that transcended war. Their legacy lives on in every precisely maintained 225-degree fire, in every carefully selected piece of post oak, in every brisket that emerges with a perfect bark after exactly 1.5 hours per pound. It's a legacy measured not in battles won or territories conquered, but in the millions of satisfied diners who have experienced the perfect merger of German precision and Texas tradition. The smoke that rises from Texas barbecue pits carries with it the stories of Werner Schmitt, Heinrich Kellner, Otto Brandt, and hundreds of other German prisoners who found unexpected purpose in unexpected places. They came in chains but left their mark in smoke and flavor. They remind us that culture is not destroyed by conflict, but can be enriched by it, that enemies need not remain enemies forever, and that sometimes the most lasting victories are won not on battlefields, but in kitchens and smokehouses. In the end, they proved that barbecue, like democracy itself, is strengthened by diverse influences and improved by the contribution of many traditions. The German POWs didn't just change Texas barbecue. They proved that food can be a bridge between cultures, a healer of wounds and a creator of community. Their smoke signals still rise across Texas, carrying a message of transformation and hope, seasoned with history and served with a side of redemption.